All right. So here we are. I don't like to use the word best for last, but you know what? Sometimes that's the right words. And I am so thrilled that we're going to be bringing Artie Whitney on now to talk about this whole sense of building and growing these 365 communities. I mean, that's really what is kind of led up to this and the culmination here. So tossing it over to you, Artie.
Great, thank you very much. Great event, and really thrilled to be here today, talking about this idea, which has been a common theme here about community. It's interesting because a lot of the groups that spoke today, or groups that we all work with, they all have different elements of community. And what I hope to show here by example are some very specific ways, some very specific examples of community, maybe to stimulate your thinking a little bit. So, but just a little bit about my background. I started in this area. I've been building communities for 30 years, and I started, maybe some listeners today started in the same way, but I started in the original SaaS. The original software as a service was publishing. I started at IDG and Wolters Kluwer and Thomson, places where information was so needed for a job function that it created a really great business, educating the buy side of a community. So those were great examples, but I was really lucky. At age 25, I was raising my daughters in New Hampshire, and I was commuting into Boston, a long commute, and two really brilliant brothers came and bought a sleepy publishing company in the town that I was in, and it was nothing more than a newsletter, and it was a directory in two industries: management consulting and executive recruiting. So, the company kind of for 10 years defined itself as a format. If you were looking for an executive recruiter, you'd look them up in that directory. And this was pre-internet, obviously. And the newsletter was, remember the days we used to subscribe to a newsletter, and it would give us information to do our job and all the movements in our industry. Well, the brothers that had bought this group had thought about it differently. They thought, we're going to turn this into thriving communities, because there are all different constituents around these communities. And from a business perspective, all different ways to monetize it that way. From a customer standpoint, all different ways to add value. So that's what I've been doing my whole career, is finding assets, publishing assets, or media assets, or event assets. And I find places where there's not a home in quotes. And I think that's a really good definition of a community. It's creating a professional home where one may not exist. Well, in the area of professional communities, there's all types of communities. There's cause communities. There's corporate communities. There's media communities. There's direct-to-consumer product communities and there's employee communities. So all different types. But I've really focused on the professional development ones. And I'm going to give some examples, because maybe it'll get you thinking about your businesses and places where you can expand. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the company I run, 365 Media, and give 4 specific examples, and just talk about this marketing shift. It was hit on a little bit in today's presentation, several times, and I want to give some points where I think it's supported. We've recently created a community for community leaders, so that might be helpful too. And I'm going to give some real examples of how to get started. But that example that I mentioned in that small, sleepy publishing company that was acquired. So back in '95, it was acquired for $1 million. And in 48 months, it sold to B&A, which is now part of Bloomberg, for $48 million. The value creation came in finding ways to leverage that directory and that newsletter into all different ways that could serve the buyers and the sellers of that community. What do I mean by that? Well, in the case of the directory, the internet was starting to move classified advertising from the old format of the newspaper to these new job boards. And today it's LinkedIn and Indeed. So we had never done an event before. So of course we were naive, and we went and rented the Jacob Javits Center and sold it out, and really got the bug for live events. But we were doing other formats like peer learning subscription models and membership sites where you could put tools and resources behind a paywall. I've done that over and over, and I'm going to give a couple more recent examples. This is my background here, the different organizations that I work with, the institutes that I've created. But I'm always kind of trying to focus on these pillars of community, and I define those as conferences, trade shows, online training, virtual event, industry award programs, SaaS businesses, research, databases, validation, publishing, peer learning, online marketplaces, job boards, certification programs, and membership sites. These are all components of thriving community, and I'm sure I haven't mentioned several of them. A couple of little testimonials about places I've gone. My organization, 365 Media, that this is what we do. We help organizations develop these communities, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So here's example number one. We were able to get our hands on a defunct newsletter in the accounts payable space and the accounts receivable space. And these aren't areas that you would learn in college, how to do accounts payable, accounts receivable. You'd learn it on the job. And there was really no conferences for them to go to. There was no place for them to become a member of. And these were, thriving job functions, 500,000 of them in America. And fintech was starting to really change the way that companies, the finances flowed through a company. So we created a certification program here in this industry, several actually, and we created a membership where we put tools and white papers and expert answers and templates all behind a paywall. So we created a membership, we created a certification program, and we created events in Disney and Vegas, and they really took off. And 24 months from that bankrupt newsletter, it got bought by Diversified Communication, one of the larger family-owned conference businesses in America. And so I got a chance to go with it and spend 4 years up at Diversified, and it's a wonderful company with great people. And I wondered if we could apply this format to other events, because a lot of times format companies really consider themselves the formats. If you ask some companies what you are, they might say they're an event company. And I would argue that if they think of themselves as a community manager or that it could go broader. So here's a case where we took a thriving conference of professional administrative professionals, but it wasn't a need to attend event. It was a nice to attend event. We had a small association, was free to join, which was great for lead generation in. But then we said, what if we create online education for this profession? And we did, and it quickly became a six-figure product. And that show doubled 2 years following. So, it just proves the point that these formats all, when you put more pillars around a community, they complement each other. Here's one I recently did in healthcare, and I love this format. And again, this is just to kind of maybe stimulate everyone's thinking to think, could you use some of these formats in your own communities or when you're working with other companies? But I was able to get involved with an organization called the Validation Institute, and they were very unique. We all know healthcare is a bit of a mess in America, $3.7 trillion spend and not a lot of accountability. Well, about half of that is actually through self-insured employers in America. There's all these products and services and apps and all these things that sell to them, but there's no accountability on the marketing claims that they're making. So some really smart guy that was in a spin out between Intel and GE, they were selling one of these products and services to the self-insured employers, and they said, we want to make a marketing claim, but who's polices that? Who actually validates that? And the answer was nobody. And they knew there was a problem because their competitors were making mathematically impossible claims. So this was really neat. And if you think about maybe if you run an event or you run in a community, who's in a better spot to validate the claims being made by the vendor community? If you could have a little housekeeping seal of approval or a green check mark, that could be really helpful. Or maybe there's peer reviews, which you might see you see in some online sites, and it's really established in the travel industry for sure. But here I took that same philosophy and said, what other pillars could we do to strengthen this community? And we realized was the people that were buying all these products and services and buying healthcare for their employers were getting their education from the exact same organizations that make more money when rates go up and services go down, the insurance companies and the brokers. Not all, but many. So we said, well, what if we could create an education program, a standardized education program for the buyer of healthcare services in a corporation. And that's what we did. We created the Certified Health Value Professional Program. We created 10 modules of online learning. We did it in about 6 months. And then now you've got educated buyers and validated sellers, and you can bring them together in a dynamic online directory at events in hosted buyer type situations. I love the saying up here in the Northeast. I'm in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, above Boston, but there's a saying that says, Cy Sims said, an educated consumer is our best customer. And I thought that applied here as well. So creating a certification program. But when you think about your community, and you've all seen these ecosystem diagrams, the one on the left is one I did in accounting, one on the right I did in medical technology, and it doesn't matter. It's just that there's no map a lot of times in your niche community for people to kind of know their way around. Like what serves what? What does the landscape even look like? But so this is just a neat device that you might consider creating to kind of give some roadmap to your community. So I'm going to give one more specific example. I launched this about 7 months ago. No, this is old now, actually, 7 months ago. It was about a year ago right now. COVID was hitting strong. And back in 2010, I was the CEO of something called the Trade Show News Network, which covered the trade show industry. And these new things called virtual events were coming into play. And they were clunky, for sure. But I stuck with them, and I got on the board of something called OnStream Media, which invented webcasting. And I stayed with virtual events. So when COVID hit a year ago, my phone was ringing off the hook, and I got put on a virtual event about the monetization of virtual events. And here's actually a survey I did back in 2010 about virtual events. You can see the date. And the finding is, what we're finding out now is these aren't replacements for the physical show, and they're not intended to be. They're enhancements. They add to the overall value of the physical show, and I would replace that now with community. So I was just 10 years early. But I got on this virtual event about the monetization of virtual events, and 15,000 people came on all these. So we knew there was going to be a real need for people to learn how to do best practice around virtual events. So me and some colleagues, we got together, and we worked very hard. And last July, end of July, we launched the Virtual Events Institute, which we started with 10 modules of online learning. Just yesterday, we ran the Virtual Events Institute Awards program from the Excel Center in London. And if you saw it, our host jumped out of a plane on a parachute and came into a really incredible virtual stage that a lot of these venues are starting to create now because of what Laura talked about with a hybrid opportunity a little bit. But really exciting. And this is the start of a community. So we've got education. We've got people coming to learn. We've got best practices happening now because of the awards program. It's a great model, actually. Ask people for their best practices so you can create a community that creates a membership opportunity for them to get the best practices back in aggregate. So again, these are all just ideas to get you thinking. And this is where I think, it gets really exciting. Like we talked about this a little bit in other sessions, but marketing is clearly evolving. I was a big fan of Mad Men, and we had a certain kind of marketing then, and we had then direct marketing, and we then moved on to one-to-one marketing and social media marketing and inbound marketing. But I really, really fully believe that we are moving towards community marketing, and it affects every organization that is involved with customers or members in any way. So in all of commerce. So corporations are realizing you can go direct to community now. It's the best model. It's rather than saying, buy my stuff, come to my show. Instead, create a community of value. And then it's just a detail that you're doing a show. And of course they're going to attend because they're part of that community. And it creates that level of engagement and commitment for your members. This is the headline I love. TechCrunch recently called the chief community officer the new CMO. And then they said, community isn't a single Slack group or event or newsletter. It's an aggregation of all these touch points, and it includes both eventual customers and one-time users. So I just put this here. This is what I think. Community is a home. It's a place of belonging, and it's the future of marketing. Anybody that's a fan of Seinfeld, if you remember, Kramer had a coffee table book of coffee table idea. And I love that. So we, 365 Media, we help organizations develop online training, online directories, events, virtual events. We help them strategize around building these communities, membership sites as well. What I realized was what I needed to do was create a community for community leaders. I know that sounds a little funny, but and here's a link here that you can grab from to become a member, and maybe Bill can send that out as well. But what we did was we stood it up very quickly just to test the idea, and we started loading it up with tools and resources that might be helpful to someone that's considering moving towards community or building a community. We quickly, in 9 weeks now, we're 611 members. A lot of engagement going on, and we're gonna keep pushing that. We're gonna turn this into the community of communities, but we're really excited. But it's a totally free resource. You'll find a persona template in there. You'll find a budgeting tool. You'll find a job description for the community manager. All things that might be helpful. But think about that as you're thinking about creating a community for yourself. What if you can just simply create a toolkit, for your members, because they all have tools that they're using, but they're not sharing. And if you can encourage that, or start to prime the pump by creating some yourself, and then get the sharing going, it becomes like a flywheel. So, how to get started. Think about your media assets. Is there a specialized education that can be packaged? I love this idea of creating online training as a component of community, and it can happen in so many ways. We're working with an organization that's involved in the aquaculture area right now in a 50c3 that's trying to really improve the environmental aspects and the lives of people all along that supply chain. But we're creating online training that's going to be very, very helpful to that as one of the first components of community. We're helping Coffee Fest, which can't run live right now, so there's no place for the coffee entrepreneurs that own the mom and pop shops to go and learn about all the new techniques and supplies. So we help them create Coffee Fest 365, which they're going to be launching soon. But are there tools? Are there researches? Are there peer-to-peer best practices? Are there benchmarks? And a need to connect? I think a lot of these questions are basic, but hopefully this just gets you thinking about the elements that create gravity in a community. Is there another creative way to develop a reoccurring asset? Because I love this idea of sustainability in a community. My wife works for a nonprofit, or Habitat for Humanity. She's a financial director in Portland, Maine. And I don't know if you're familiar with Habitat for Humanity, but they have this thing called a Restore. And people donate construction items and house items to the Restore, which they resell. And it's a great place to go. But it supplies a good amount of the funding for building the homes, which is the real mission of Habitat for Humanity. So I like that idea that it applies to community is, could you create maybe a SaaS product inside your community that gives you the financing to have sustainability, to be able to really hire a full-time community manager, or even a part-time one to get started. Can you create an addictive product inside the workflow of your community or the process that your community members are in, like the IOFM example that I mentioned? Is there a subscription data or an intelligence opportunity? I mentioned StoreTrack. My partner at 365 Media recognized that all these rental units were going up all around the country on the side of the highway. You see them. We have too much stuff in our garage, so we have to rent another garage space to put our stuff in and closets. But the funny thing is, nobody knew what to charge for these, and yet they were popping up all around the country. And everybody individually listed their cost of their closet or their garage for these storage areas individually on the website. So that created a product, a sustainable product, a subscription product. Aggregate that pricing, keep it up to date, and then sell it as a subscription product to the community of people that run those businesses. It's a very successful business right now, and I think it's a great example. I gave another example up here above rig data. I didn't keep track of where this is today, but maybe 10, 12 years ago, I met an individual at a networking event that had picked up in bankruptcy an asset that followed the parts and components that were on an oil rig. And it was in a directory. It was in a print book. Not very useful, but he put that in behind a paywall and created a membership opportunity for it. And you can bet that grew. I remember him saying it grew to a $10 million business. But it becomes a necessity to the people that are in that industry. I apologize. There's a train going right through my town right now. Can you create a minimally viable product? Let me call it a minimally viable community, which is a low disruption to your current business. And can you take some of these components of community and strengthen your community? So I hope that was helpful. As you're thinking about your community and the elements that you have to work with, are there ways to expand it to make it sustainable? And I realize all the examples I gave are either for-profit or revenue-generating communities, but I know we also have a lot of people on the call that are involved in the event space, which is one of the major drive of revenue, and we haven't been able to do it. There's been incredible innovation with virtual, and that's filled a gap. And when we come back, and I had to comment earlier about this always on community, there's a book that came out recently by Marco Gilberti called Reinventing Live. And he talks about that exactly. And he talks about no more of this see you next year attitude. Like, you have a 3-day show and I'll see you next year. That's just not going to cut it anymore, because people are there with the knowledge at the right time, with the right education, in the right format delivery that somebody wants. And then just the future of just what we do is changing. We think that going the return to office or hybrid environment that will exist in the future. But also I remember, and I say this to reporters sometimes when I'm interviewed on virtual events, I once embarrassingly flew to Las Vegas for lunch from Boston. I mean, how horrible is that for our planet, that the carbon footprint? It was back the same day, but at night, of course, and I missed dinner with my kids. That stuff just is not going to cut it anymore. We don't need to do that. Look, we're having a thriving discussion here, and it will live on as well. So all kinds of opportunities to think about this slingshot that's just happened into the future because of the pandemic. There's lots of terrible things, of course, that have happened from it, but there's also a lot of good things and innovations that are going to make us stronger and create opportunities that we never thought of. So hopefully I stimulated some thinking today, and appreciate the opportunity to present to everyone.
Thank you very much. And certainly a lot of great information. Comment that you just made related to jumping on an airplane for a meal. I was thinking about that the other day, and I thought how many times I've done that. And, I think, we're going to see a big shift in that. And great information. Artie, it's a pleasure to see you, and thank you for taking the time.
Great. Thanks for the show. It's great.
Cool. All right. Bring back Bill. There's my man. Well, how about that? That flew by. That was a fast few hours, huh?
That was definitely a fast few hours, and what a day. I think I have almost at the point of brain overload, but we designed this event specifically so that it wasn't too much. But there's a lot of great content here. I'm really, really excited to, obviously thank everybody that listened to it live, but also share this with everybody afterwards and deliver it in an atomized content format that Rachel had spoken about.
I love that. Also is kind of wild is that, okay, so everybody was separate. They all had their things. We didn't, I'm not a big fan of rehearsals. I like everything super organic. And I could not get over the weaving of this, of how we're all kind of heading in the same direction in a lot of things, around authenticity and community. And I just loved it. I just loved how these words all played together.
Yeah. And, we didn't even let everybody know that there was a theme, because there wasn't. It just happens that there became a theme based off of everybody's session. But it just goes to show you, that great minds do think alike. And there are a bunch of us that are willing to help spread kind of the direction of which, the industry is moving, but also understand that all of us don't know everything, but we're willing to experiment and try for you so that, you can learn from those. So yeah, I appreciate all of our speakers on here, and obviously I appreciate you, Brad, for not only the keynote but the MC and adding that level of entertainment. And I do hope that everybody saw what having an MC can really do, not even for a virtual event, but when you go back to hybrid and you go back to live, because really engaging both sides of your event, right? So your virtual and your live is going to be key to ensuring that it's successful.
It really is. It really is. It's funny. I just inked a deal yesterday, and one of the cool things I'm going to be doing, because we struggle with what are we going to do with this live energy, and then we have this virtual audience, and there's always going to be some form of virtual audience. And we were talking about the trade show, and so one of the things that is going to be really cool is I'm going to be roving around, and we're actually going to have virtual people that want to have in-booth appointments, and I'm going to help bridge those together and make those happen live with a person virtual. I mean, that's cool. And there's a lot of fun things going on in that regard. So yeah, it's just the flow, the conversation, the connectivity, I think is really, really important.
It is. Well, thank you, Brad. I have no more insights to add to this very nugget-filled day. So hopefully at least you came away with one nugget of information, everyone, and that means it was a success. But thank you, Brad, for all of your support, for helping out throughout this entire event. Truly appreciate it. And thank you to all our sponsors, which we'll pull up one more time before we leave. And obviously, thank you to our speakers and everyone that attended the session today.
Awesome. Hey, Bill, I just something I want to say to you. I just thought about something. Do you know, if it wasn't for the virtual world, I would not have met you. And now here we are. We're going to be hit the links in a couple of weeks. So
I can't wait. I can't wait for the tournament.
So there's all kinds of things, the silver linings come out of this.
And how we never met, I have no idea. We must have crossed paths a million times.
Well, I think therein lies another thing. I mean, you go to these big shows and you find out 2 weeks later, oh, you were at the same convention I was. I didn't know that. So again, building that community is so critical. So
it really is. It really
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, my friend.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.